I would have been prescribed electrotherapy in a sanatorium if I was born in the 1950s. Girl bosses, or as I like to call them, child exploitation in a pantsuit. The pantsuit covers up a plethora of sins. There are unfortunately common phenomena. And most of you might think about Princess Carolyn's, Jeff Bezos's, outside of that corporate vision that things like Girlboss.com like to tote, and yes, that is a real website.
War never changes.
I'm going to talk more about the media version of it. Now, until very recently, and by recently I mean maybe the last 20 years, women have fallen into mainly one of three roles: object of attraction, villain, damsel in distress, whore, or Madonna. The common thing in all these tropes is that they all revolve around men. In fact, none of these women are individuals outside of their relationship to men. And obviously, as a society, we've moved away from these tropes, right? Right? It's why things like the Bechdel test have become so common when assessing how accurately women are portrayed in media. Because until now, they weren't portrayed very well. Who would have thunk it? Keep in mind the Bechdel test is not a perfect test, however, because some pieces of media that pass the Bechdel test include Twilight and Two Girls, One Cup. Famously feminist pieces of media. What? If we're talking about specifically feminist metrics that I do like when talking about media, I always point to the Sphinx test. Basically, a more nuanced version of the Bechdel test. It's not, did a woman not talk about a man once? It revolves around mainly things like, I've got a list up on the screen, which is why I'm looking that way. Is there a woman center stage? Does she interact with other women? Is there a woman driving the action? And is she active rather than reactive? Which means that she just does it of her own volition. She doesn't have to have someone telling her to do it. Does the character avoid stereotypes? Is the character compelling and complex? Which is something that I found is lacking in most pieces of media. Is the woman's story essential? And does it have an impact on a wider audience? Now, that's kind of my litmus test for if something passes it, but I could go on for ages about how litmus tests in feminist media are kind of flawed. In fact, I probably will in a future video, because I like hearing myself talk. Flawed feminist litmus tests aside, we've progressively been thankfully moving away from stereotypes of women. At least that's what I like to tell myself to stop myself from jumping off the nearest tenement building. Riverdale doesn't exist if I don't look at it. Riverdale doesn't exist if I don't look at it. Riverdale doesn't exist if I don't look at it. But I think what this progression failed to take into account is one thing that I have known for a while, which is if there's one thing men are good at, it's making everything about themselves. And so the phenomena that I like to call girlbossification was formed. Girlbossification, in my opinion, is making a female character more like a male character in order to make them seem more strong or powerful. One of the prime examples of this being the bride from Kill Bill. Bad bitch, likes to kill people, also emotionless and has no friends. Because as we all know, you can't have friends and be strong at the same time. The girl boss tropes plays into our unconscious ideas of what is good representation of a strong and powerful woman. Basically what it means to be independent. Femininity in the eyes of directors and the general population, even if they're just unconsciously realizing it, is basically seen as subservient and kind, whereas being masculine is seen as being domineering and powerful. And in a lot of characters, there is no space for both of these things to exist simultaneously, which means that women are often stripped of their feminine traits when trying to be deemed as powerful. And here's another term that I coined for this, it's called Thatcherification. The OG girl boss. Never mind all those children that she starved out. Then there's also the other side of girlbossification, which is in characters like Black Widow, who are inherently feminine. They tend to do a lot of very feminine things, but they are feminine things that are deemed attractive and things that men like. Really good quote from Margaret Atwood on this, which is,
"Male fantasies. Male fantasies. Is everything run by male fantasies? Up on a pedestal or down on your knees, it's all a male fantasy. That you're strong enough to take what they dish out, or else too weak to do anything about it. Even pretending you aren't catering to male fantasies is a male fantasy. Pretending you're unseen. Pretending you have a life of your own, that you can wash your feet and comb your hair, unconscious of the ever-present watcher peering through the keyhole in your own head, if nowhere else. You are a woman with a man inside. watching a woman. You are your own voyeur.
Very cheery. Something that I will point out about this quote, which is relevant to this conversation, is pretending you aren't catering to a male fantasy is a fantasy in of itself. And girlbossification is possibly one of the most potent examples of that. By moving away from the idea that women should only appear in media to appease men, you do a full circle and they tend to appease men anyway. We create the image of a strong, independent woman, and that image of that strong, independent woman is then fetishized. Take Black Widow, for example. I know I've mentioned her a lot, it's because I'm gay. Sure, she's strong and independent and she don't need no man, but she also embodies a lot of the traits that men sexualize. So, for example, she wears a catsuit all the time. She's never seen as not perfectly poised. Her hair's always done. Her makeup is always perfect. She's skinny. She's the embodiment of the beauty standard. Not just that, but the reason that she's so independent is because she's been traumatized by, get this, a man! Slay Queen pop-off pussy hat.
Yas Queen skinny legend Versace boots the house down. Slay Queen hunty mama and oop daddy work Charlie X yet snatch my wig.
Even in our current climate where women are somewhat, they can vote, bare minimum. Even in our current climate, generally men will only respect a female character if they fall into one of two categories, one of which being like a man and falling into the boys club, where you can get drinks with friends and get hate crimed all in the same night. Or if you fall into what is effectively a independent but not too independent stereotype of women. There is no space for women to just be powerful and exist in media because in our current... Can you shut the fuck up? Because currently most producers deem that there's no market for that. Women can't be just powerful in media because being a woman isn't inherently powerful to a man. We're still a far cry from nuanced representation in media, unfortunately. This is just a rant. I've just been ranting. But girlbossification is not only reflective of media attitudes, but general population attitude. Even when a woman is trying to exist independently outside of the lens of the male gaze, it's still... you still fall back into it. You're trapped. Women are doomed. As Margaret Atwood put it, you are a woman with a man inside watching a woman. And that's inescapable. Have a good night.